Today's episode takes us to Ashburn in Virginia, home to 21-year-old Bethany and Decker. Bethany's mother Kim said her daughter was just simply a joy to be around, always upbeat and had been smiling since the day she was born. She had two younger siblings who said she was the leader of the pack, confident, encouraging, and supportive. After years of excelling in school, she was accepted into George Mason University, hoping to gain a degree in global and economic change. One of her roommates said she could put off an essay until the night before, write it in an hour, and come out with an A star. She was very intelligent, she recalled. It was in her freshman year that Bethany met Emil Decker, a cadet in the Reserve Officers Training Corps who was set to join the Army National Guard. Emil was a hopeless romantic, and Bethany's family said she could mention the smallest, most seemingly insignificant thing just once, and he would remember it and try and act on it. Bethany's family adored him, and he fit right in as if they'd been together their whole lives. After a couple of years of dating, Emil proposed. No sooner had they got engaged than Bethany found out she was pregnant. The young couple were so excited to start their family and life together, and although the baby had come sooner than maybe planned, the pregnancy was a welcome surprise. They called their baby boy Kai. However, family and friends said the stress of a newborn baby on top of having little money to support them soon set in. While Emil started training with the Army National Guard units, Bethany, who was still studying at George Mason, took up a part-time job in a restaurant to get some more money. The stress only mounted further when Emil started prepping to be deployed to Afghanistan. Between both their families helping out, the pair were just about coping. But knowing Emil would soon be away for long periods of time was hard for Bethany to deal with. She said she felt like the pair were drifting apart and they were living in two completely separate worlds. She told Emil she worried they had rushed into things and should have taken more time to plan. Some sources say at this point they decided to try a separation and take a break. Emil was upset but wanted to give Bethany what she needed. As he left the country, Bethany moved into a new apartment so she could be closer to her job and pick up as many shifts as possible. One day at the restaurant, things would take a massive shift, which changed the course of everything. Bethany met 31-year-old Ronald Roldan, who was originally from Bolivia. Before long, the pair were involved in a romantic relationship. Bethany told friends she was lonely and isolated, with Emil being overseas for such long periods of time, and despite her friends' reservations, Ronald soon moved into Bethany's apartment. Her best friend Sarah said she was shocked and warned her against it, but she ultimately wanted to see Bethany happy, and Bethany was going to do what she wanted to anyway. She and Emil were still separated and communication was dwindling, but he could sense something was going on. The relationship with Ronald was bad from the get-go. He was controlling, jealous, and violent, and everyone saw it in him. Kim said she was frightened, hearing horror stories about what was going on inside the apartment. She even suspected that Ronald had hurt Kai, as Kai not only seemed scared of him, but he had a black eye on one occasion. The story they were told was that a friend was watching him and he fell backwards off of a chair. But Bethany's family were not so sure. They also found out that Ronald had phoned Kai's daycare and pretended to be Emil. Fortunately, the daycare could tell something was wrong and nothing happened. But this resulted in them setting up a code to use over the phone, so they knew not to answer to Ronald if he called again. Ronald would text and call constantly, asking to see proof of where she was and who she was with. He would even follow her to houses she said she was going to, just to make sure she actually was, and then he would sit and wait for her outside until she left. Bethany was now in a very bad situation and decided to come clean and tell Emil everything, saying she knew she had made a mistake. Emil still wanted to make things work, saying his family was his priority. He said he could tell that something had been wrong for many months, as she was now working about 6 days a week and barely talking to him, and when she did communicate, she was distant and not present. Bethany and Emil decided to go on holiday when he was home on leave to try and patch things up. Their marriage was hanging by a thread at this point, and the situation was messy to say the least. She was telling her mother and friends that the situation with Ronald was now so bad she needed to either get him out somehow or leave the apartment herself in secret. She and Kim started working on a plan to make this happen. As 2010 came to an end, Emil sent a sweet message to his young family. In mid-January 2011, he was granted leave and the pair decided they would still go on holiday together. As Bethany met him at the airport, it was clear there was another issue to contend with. Bethany was pregnant again and Ronald was the father. Emil said he wasn't angry and still wanted the holiday in Hawaii to go ahead. He said, "I'd been overseas and it was a completely different world. Coming back to the United States, I was just happy to be home, to be alive, to be with my family. That anything else in the whole entire world really did not matter to me at all. It was definitely a make or break trip, and by all accounts they did have a lovely time in Hawaii. It was the most they'd seen each other, laughed together, and just talked in ages. Felt like things could start to get back on track." When Emil and Bethany got back on the 28th of January, Bethany visited her grandma. They had a nice afternoon making pizza and talking about the trip, but her grandma said she could tell there were more stories than Bethany was sharing. She was so young with so much going on, and everything was clearly getting on top of her. Bethany later confided that she was drowning in stress, guilt, and sadness, and it was the lowest she had felt in her whole life. Later that night, Emil joined them for dinner where the crisis talks continued. Without warning, Bethany's phone started to go off. She grabbed her things and rushed out, saying they didn't understand what was going to happen to her if she didn't go home. Emil was due back in just a few days, and although the break had been good for them, it still wasn't clear how things would be once he left. Bethany drove back to her apartment as Emil packed up, ready to fly out on the 2nd of February. The plan was she would meet him at the airport to see him off, telling him, "I will always be there no matter what." On February 2nd, Emil arrived at the airport hoping to see Bethany there, but she didn't turn up. He called her restaurant, and they said she hadn't been into work for the last few days. Before he boarded, he called around Bethany's family to give them the heads up that something seemed wrong. Regardless of any issues the pair ever had, Bethany was always at the airport to see him go. Over the next few days, friends and family tried to make contact with Bethany, but she didn't answer her phone once. Bethany's mother Kim then received a few strange phone calls, which remain undisclosed, and Bethany's friend Sarah got some Facebook messages that stood out immediately. She logged in and saw that Bethany was online. Having not heard from her in a while, she started up a chat in Messenger. She said she knew right away it was not Bethany sending the messages back. The English was broken, words were misspelled, and basic things she would have been able to answer, she couldn't. Sarah called Kim and told her suspicions. Emil also got an email from Bethany's account, and he too said he didn't believe his wife had typed it. By this point, they had received messages from 4 different people, all saying they thought Bethany's Facebook account had been hacked into. Bethany's grandparents live closer to Bethany than Kim, so they decided to drive over to her complex. They found Bethany's car parked outside. It was at an odd angle with a flat tire. This was even more odd because no one had seen her car there before this point. It seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. They knocked on the door, but the silence was deafening. They called 911 on February 19th and reported her missing. Bethany's family said it was not unusual for her to go several days without talking to anyone or replying, and before they all knew it, it was 3 weeks later. Given the fact she hadn't seen or spoken to anyone during this time, as well as being pregnant, authorities did not miss a beat and moved quickly, concerned they had already lost a lot of time. A quick search of her phone, credit and debit cards showed they had not been accessed since January 29th. She hadn't shown up to any of her classes. She hadn't checked herself into any of the nearby hospitals. She hadn't gone into work, and given the fact her passport was at home, she hadn't left the country either. When police went to her apartment, they determined there were no signs of any forced entry or a struggle, and nothing appeared to be glaringly out of place. Her belongings were all still there, indicating she hadn't packed up to go anywhere either. There was nothing inside her car that indicated foul play or pointed to where she might have gone. It was now the first week of March, and detectives decided to hold a press conference. Divers were searching the waters, canine units were around the fields, and the FBI were brought in too. Police were getting leads, but they were going nowhere. None of these tips came to anything. It seemed that the last person to have seen Bethany, given the timeline they knew, was Emil. He was granted permission to fly home and help with the investigation. He voluntarily took a polygraph test and underwent hours of interrogation, answering everything twice over, and was completely supportive of everything the police needed. He said he had absolutely nothing to do with Bethany being missing, and even despite all their issues, his mind was racing and he was deeply concerned. He said he understood why he was being looked at so closely. He happened to leave the country around the same time she went missing, and had just found out she was pregnant with another man's child, but he said he let the police ask everything they needed to, no matter how painful the questions were, so they could rule him out and he could start helping. All of his movements in between the 28th of January and the 2nd of February were all accounted for as well. Authorities had to consider the possibility that given all of her stresses, she had just wanted a total break and had dipped off the radar. But going this long without talking to her mother and grandmother and without seeing Kai was definitely not the Bethany they knew. The police were still treating her disappearance as a missing persons case and not anything more sinister. They didn't identify anyone as a suspect, calling it premature and saying they wanted to encourage the public to keep looking for her without putting anything into their heads. There was, however, one more person they needed to talk to, Ronald Roldan. He was no longer living in the apartment and they had found him at his parents' house. He told them he had moved out recently as the relationship had come to an end. His story actually informed the detectives that he was the last person to see her. Whereas Emil had last seen her on the 28th of January, Ronald said he saw her on the afternoon of January the 29th. He said she was in the apartment and she seemed her usual self. This was partly corroborated by the manager, who said that she had called in just after 2 p.m. on January 29th to get her next shifts for the week. She also confirmed her shift for that night, but she never showed up to work it. Ronald said he hadn't reported her disappearance as now the relationship was over. He naturally just hadn't had any communication with her to even realize she was missing. ATM records showed that he left Bethany's apartment the afternoon she was last seen and made a withdrawal from his bank at 4:26 p.m. He then returned to the apartment after getting a text from his ex-girlfriend Danielle, with whom he shared 2 children. Ronald sent 2 messages to Bethany, one at 4:01 p.m. and one at 4:31 p.m., to tell her he would be staying with his children at their apartment. But it was confirmed that after Bethany contacted work at 2:08 p.m., her phone had no activity. Whether these messages were received is still unknown, but it appeared he had been trying to get hold of her. Danielle said she did drop the children with him at about 4:30 p.m., and Ronald told her he wasn't sure if Bethany would be coming back, as the couple had had a fight and she'd taken off. When Danielle returned a few days later, Ronald told her he hadn't seen or heard from Bethany since that day. A search warrant was now issued for his apartment, but this turned up nothing. His computer, phone, and hard drives were all seized, but they drew a blank here as well. A quick background check on Ronald found he did have history with the police, but at this point there was absolutely nothing to link him to Bethany's disappearance. Given the fact that detectives now knew he was the last person to see her, he was considered a person of interest but not a suspect. Bethany's story was now national news, made even more intriguing for journalists when it got out that she had been married to a man that they had interviewed and was having a baby with another man who was now a potential person of interest. May 2011 would be the month Bethany was due to give birth, and detectives issued another press release, contacting hospitals to see if she had checked in anywhere. Again, they were met with silence. The months would soon turn into years and time was slipping by. Police were still no further forward than when they had started. But in May 2012, a new detective was assigned to the case, and the family said they were hopeful for fresh eyes that could help them. On this particular year, what would have been Bethany's 23rd birthday coincided with Mother's Day, and family and friends gathered to spread awareness and share stories. Emil and Kai were also in attendance. Kim even connected with the Harrington family, who lost their daughter Morgan in 2009, a case we actually covered on the channel a while ago. They cut a big cake for Bethany, made in her favorite color, orange. In late 2012, Investigation Discovery aired an episode of their show Disappeared, dedicated to Bethany's case, which gave it more attention but still no answers. As time continued to pass, the tips and leads became few and far between, and focuses on other investigations had to take priority. Emil eventually filed for divorce from Bethany and was given sole custody of their son Kai. Everything remained pretty quiet until November 2014, when a completely separate 911 call would shine a whole new light on the case. On the 12th of November 2014, police in North Carolina responded to a shocking call. It was almost 2 a.m. and it appeared to be a very serious domestic incident. A woman called Vicky said she had shot her boyfriend twice in self-defense when he had attacked her. Out of nowhere, he had walked up behind her, grabbed her by her hair and snapped her neck, breaking it in 2 places. He then started punching and biting her. Despite being in what must have been immense pain, Vicky managed to grab her gun and shoot him twice. He then snatched the gun off her and shot her 3 times, once in the head. She still managed to crawl out of the house all the way to a neighbor's home. Her neighbor locked the doors, grabbed his gun and called 911. Vicky's boyfriend was none other than Ronald Roldan. He was arrested and charged with attempted murder. Although much to Vicky's anger, the attempted murder charge was dropped as he entered a plea deal. He was sentenced to a minimum of 6 years, and after completing his sentence, he was scheduled to be transferred into the custody of U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, who would start the process of deporting him back to Bolivia. Vicky told authorities that Ronald had said he could make people disappear. A friend had even called Vicky and said that she had seen a Nancy Grace episode about Bethany's case, which named Ronald as a person of interest. Vicky confronted him and said his reaction terrified her. She knew something was wrong, but he now knew that she knew about Bethany, and she said the violence had escalated since that point. Vicky said if he was ever let out of prison, he would either come back to kill her or kill someone else. He was clearly a very dangerous and violent individual, and given everything Vicky had told them, he needed to be looked at once again in relation to Bethany's case. Vicky went on to tell her story on Dr. Phil. She had lost an eye because of him, her neck had been broken in 2 places, and she was facing financial ruin due to the cost of the medical bills. But she was determined to keep telling her story and help the police build their case. She contacted Kim personally to tell her everything she knew and offer her support. Investigators also found out that before he was seeing Vicky, Ronald was dating a waitress called April. She had pressed charges against him too when he pushed her down a flight of stairs, spat on her and threw all her belongings outside. He agreed to pay her $2,500 and the charges were eventually dropped. Detectives working on Bethany's case made the journey over to his new prison to interview him again, but he was verbally abusive, shouting and swearing at them, refusing to talk. This only spurred them on more. Through his lawyer, Ronald maintained he had nothing to do with Bethany's disappearance. He said he was hopeful that Bethany would come home and was praying for her safe return. In March 2019, investigators said there had now been positive movement in Bethany's case. They didn't specify the development, but they did say it came after a search warrant of Bethany's Facebook account was finally issued and analyzed. The search warrant had been signed by Detective Michael Boone, a man who was actually instrumental in solving the murders of Hannah Graham and Morgan Harrington. Morgan Harrington's family had become close to Kim, offering her a support system. Over the next year and into 2020, things again went quiet and the police didn't share anything with the media, keeping all their cards close to their chests. They were on the cusp of a huge break. November 2020. The news everyone had been waiting for almost a decade finally broke. The information that had pushed this forward showed that Bethany and Ronald's individual Facebook accounts were both accessed many times from the same IP address in the days around her disappearance. Ronald Roldan was finally arraigned on abduction charges, and just 1 month later, the charge was upgraded to second-degree murder in the case of Bethany and Decker. Prosecutors said the circumstantial evidence was very strong and it was a solid case. Ronald's lawyers asked for bail, but the judge said there was no way. He pleaded not guilty and his trial was scheduled to start in August 2021, but this was pushed back to February 2022. The trial was then set back a final time when the county sheriff's office released a further 60,000 files against Ronald, and his defense team needed more time to go through everything. The new trial would be January 30th, 2023, and this date would mark just a day after the 12-year anniversary of Bethany's disappearance. Everyone now just had to sit, wait, and continue to be patient just a little bit longer. However, no trial would commence. In November 2022, 41-year-old Ronald Roldan pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. As part of his plea agreement, he was asked to say what had happened that day. Ronald claimed they had gotten into an argument in the apartment and he pushed her, She fell and hit her head on the windowsill and died instantly. Too scared to call 911, he put her body into a large bag and dumped her into the trash compactor at the complex. He still denied using her Facebook account and maintained his story of it being accidental, and he panicked. Given his history of abuse and violence, police and experts doubt his claims of it being unintentional and a total accident, and his denial of accessing her accounts had also long been proven to be false. In February 2023, Ronald was given 12.5 years. He was actually sentenced to 40 years, which was the maximum. However, all but 12.5 were suspended due to his plea deal. He could still serve more time if he commits another crime or violates the conditions of his release. Through all the hearings, Kim and Vicky sat together and watched as he was sentenced. Bethany's family said they were angry that he will only be in prison a few months longer than they had spent searching for her. But they said they were grateful they finally had some sort of closure. So many lives have been affected by this case, and it was a long and painful wait for answers. To this day, Bethany's remains have never been found, and police feel it is unlikely they ever will be. Kim said all she can do is keep Bethany's memory alive and encourage people to be vocal and tell loved ones you care about them, because you just never know what will happen. She continues to work with Help Save the Next Girl, a national nonprofit organization founded by Morgan Harrington's parents in her honor. It's a way of educating and spreading awareness by talking about safety and violence prevention. She said, "The night before Bethany was murdered, she called me and said, 'Mom, I love you.' That was the last thing she said. So I just want to encourage each and every one of you to not take for granted tomorrow and to really make sure that you are talking to your loved ones, that you're letting people know how much you care and not wait for the tomorrow, which may never be." Autumn Leigh McClure, a 16-year-old girl, resided with her grandmother in Ormond Beach, Florida. She attended Mainland High School. On May 10, 2004, Autumn's grandmother contacted the sheriff's office to report her missing after she failed to return home. The last known sighting of Autumn was with her boyfriend. Upon questioning, her boyfriend informed the police that he had dropped her off at the Volusia Mall and hadn't seen her since. A search was initiated, but no trace of Autumn was found. Later on, Autumn's grandmother informed detectives that Autumn had caught her from a different area code and had sent letters postmarked from Melbourne, Florida, stating that she was safe and would return home after turning 18. The case went dormant until 2004, when detectives received information that Autumn had been staying with Brian Donnelly and Jessica Freeman. The detectives visited their residence and were informed that Autumn had stayed with them briefly before leaving. Donnelly and Freeman claimed to be Autumn's co-workers at a Winn-Dixie supermarket. They mentioned that Autumn had a strange relationship with her grandmother, which led them to offer her temporary accommodation in their trailer. However, they had no further knowledge about her whereabouts. Despite the case going cold, the detectives persisted in their efforts. They obtained DNA samples from Autumn's family members and entered them into a national database for missing children. The case remained unsolved until 12 years later, when the detectives reached out to Autumn's boyfriend again. This time he admitted to lying about dropping her off at the Volusia Mall. He confessed that he had actually left her at the Seabreeze Bridge, where she then got into a car with Jessica Freeman. Detectives managed to locate Freeman, who had relocated to Nevada, but she denied any involvement in Autumn's disappearance. A breakthrough occurred when a tipster informed the police that Freeman and Donnelly were connected to Autumn's disappearance. Freeman, who was questioned by the police once again, requested immunity in exchange for providing information about Autumn's disappearance. She disclosed that she worked alongside Autumn and that both she and Donnelly permitted Autumn to reside with them in the trailer. Freeman also revealed that she was involved in a sexual relationship with the couple. According to Freeman, upon returning home one day, she witnessed Donnelly allegedly choking Autumn in the bathroom. Despite her efforts, she was unable to save Autumn, prompting her to leave the trailer where they all resided. When Freeman returned 2 weeks later and inquired about Autumn's whereabouts, Donnelly reportedly threatened her by saying, "Shut up or the same thing will happen to you." Freeman claimed that Donnelly had confessed to cutting up Autumn's body, purring her and scattering her remains in various locations. Although she was unaware of the exact burial site, Freeman informed authorities in late 2023 that she suspected Autumn's body was buried beneath the trailer as Dunley had expressed satisfaction over new concrete being laid at the location. Following a ground-penetrating radar investigation, authorities detected areas of varying density beneath the surface. Consequently, they collaborated with the current owner of the trailer to excavate the remains. In February 2024, authorities recovered nearly all of Autumn's remains, which were sent to the medical examiner for identification confirmation. Despite the discovery of her remains, Dudley could not be prosecuted as he passed away in 2022. The day following Thanksgiving, commonly known as Black Friday, holds a prominent position in the United States as one of the busiest shopping days of the year. However, the Black Friday of November 25, 1994 was far from joyful for Luz Musino, a 38-year-old woman, and her two teenage daughters, 18-year-old Edith and 17-year-old Gabriella, who went missing on that day. As time passed without any communication from them, a close friend took the initiative to report their disappearance to the Downey Police Department. The circumstances surrounding their vanishing raised numerous questions. How did an entire family go missing at once? And would they ever be found? This mystery takes us to Downey, California, a vibrant and diverse city located in Los Angeles County. Known for its rich history and suburban charm, Downey is most famous for being the birthplace of the Apollo space program and is home to the Columbia Memorial Space Center, a testament to its aerospace heritage. With a population of over 110,000 residents, Downey generally maintains a crime rate significantly lower than the national average, contributing to its reputation as a relatively safe community. Unfortunately, this did not prevent a heinous crime from occurring in 1994. In early December of that year, the Downey Police Department received a distressing call from an undisclosed concerned friend. This woman filed a missing persons report for her friend, 37-year-old Luz Maria Machino, and Luz Maria's teenage daughters, 18-year-old Edith and 17-year-old Gabriella. The trio had last been seen on November 25, 1994, the day after Thanksgiving, and their sudden disappearance raised significant concerns. On December 8, 1994, Detective John Lynch and his team from the Downey Police Department searched Luz's apartment, located on the 11,600 block of Old River School Road in Downey. Although the detectives found the residence empty, there were unsettling clues left behind. Blood splatter was detected inside the residence, causing immediate concern. Investigators found a large brownish-red stain on the carpet in one of the bedrooms, covering the entire closet area. Additionally, another red spot was discovered in the second bedroom. To further examine these findings, it sought the assistance of Steve Rentaria, a criminalist from the Los Angeles County Crime Lab, to conduct comprehensive tests and investigations. Subsequent tests conducted by Steve Rentaria confirmed that both stains were indeed positive for human blood. In an effort to uncover any additional blood evidence that may have gone unnoticed during visual inspection, Renteria proceeded to conduct the luminal test. As expected, he discovered a blood trail originating from the bloodstain found in the second bedroom. Renteria believed it was likely that someone had bled to death, but without conducting further tests to determine the amount of blood required to create the pattern, he couldn't definitively provide the detectives with evidence. Meanwhile, the detectives faced their own challenges. In order to conduct a thorough investigation, they needed to delve into Luz's life. However, Luz and her daughters were undocumented illegal immigrants. Detective Lynch's primary suspect in the case was Luz's common-law husband, 39-year-old Estanislo Prado Gonzalez. As investigators delved deeper into the couple's history, they made a shocking discovery. Gonzalez was the father of Luz's twin children, a son named Carlos and a daughter named Raquel. However, their relationship had been tumultuous, leading to their separation when the twins were about a year old, approximately 3 years prior to their mysterious disappearance. In 1994, when the twins were around 4 years old, the couple decided to live together again. Troublingly, detectives uncovered that the family had moved into the rented apartment shortly before the disappearance. Despite having signed a 1-year lease, Gonzalez was observed by the building manager hastily vacating the apartment with the twins just days before Luz, Edith, and Gabriela disappeared. When questioned about the sudden move, Gonzalez cited ongoing relationship issues as the reason for leaving. He also mentioned that Luz was planning to relocate to Mexico as part of their separation plans, but neither she nor the two eldest daughters were anywhere to be found. The Downey detectives suspected foul play and treated the case as potential murder investigation. However, their progress was hindered by the limitations of DNA technology at the time, preventing them from decoding the blood evidence they possessed. Furthermore, the absence of bodies categorized the investigation officially as a missing persons case. Despite expanding their search to neighboring states and even Mexico, no missing persons alerts, bank records, or cell phone records provided any leads. The family doctor in Mexico also confirmed that he had not heard from Luz and Gonzalez for a considerable period. Additional information came to light when investigators contacted the manager of a costume shop where both Luz and Gonzalez had worked. The manager revealed that in 1994, Gonzalez had called to inform them about the family's relocation to Mexico and his intention to collect their paychecks. However, Gonzalez never followed through with this plan after being informed that Luz needed to personally retrieve her paycheck. In an attempt to locate Estanislao Gonzalez, investigators placed a vehicle hold at the Mexican border on a van registered under his name. Despite this measure, Gonzalez failed to appear. Despite their diligent efforts, the investigation eventually reached a dead end due to the lack of substantial evidence. Consequently, this case joined the ranks of many unsolved mysteries, leaving the truth unresolved. In 1999, Sergeant Jim Elzasser of the Downey Police Department decided to re-examine the perplexing Musino disappearance case as he approached retirement. Similar to the previous detectives who had worked on the case, Elzasser held suspicions that Luz, Edith, and Gabriela were no longer alive, with Estanislao Gonzalez playing a significant role in their disappearance. Despite Gonzalez remaining off the radar, the detectives made progress in the case. By 1999, advancements in DNA technology had opened up new possibilities. To gain fresh insights, they analyzed the blood-stained pieces of carpet. Fortunately, this step brought them closer to identifying the individuals to whom the blood belonged. The blood could potentially be linked to either the two sisters or the mother and one of the daughters. But additional evidence was still needed for conclusive results. In a desperate attempt to uncover any additional information, Jim Elzasser conducted searches using the names of Musino and her daughters in various databases, but unfortunately, he came up empty-handed. However, a breakthrough occurred when he decided to investigate the vehicle identification number for Gonzalez's van in national records. To his surprise, it was discovered that Gonzalez had recently registered his van in Las Vegas. A call to the Las Vegas police confirmed that he was indeed residing in the city with the twins. Unfortunately, due to other ongoing cases and a lack of available resources, the Downey detectives were unable to pursue an investigation in Las Vegas. This was also because they still lacked direct evidence against Gonzalez, aside from their suspicions. In 2002, the case was revisited this time by Downey Police Department officers Dwayne Cooper and Gil Toledo. Recognizing the importance of contacting Gonzalez, they reached out to the Las Vegas authorities and requested their assistance. With both agencies now involved, a dedicated team of detectives was assembled to work on the case. Detective Cooper and Toledo from Downey, along with Las Vegas police officers Linda Turner and Paul Woodshea, comprised the investigative team. Their thorough investigation confirmed that Estanislao Gonzalez and the twins were residing in a dilapidated trailer off Boulder Highway in Las Vegas. On February 6, 2003, Tablo traveled to Las Vegas accompanied by Officer Linda Turner and Paul Wochik to visit the Gonzalez residence. However, the investigators were aware that they couldn't directly question Gonzalez about Luz, Edith, or Gabriela. Doing so might have startled him and potentially led to his escape with the children. Therefore, they needed to carefully strategize their approach to ensure the twins' safety and gather the necessary information. Surprisingly, Gonzalez proved to be very cooperative. The condition of the home was deplorable with disorganization, filth, rotten food, offices, and exposed wires everywhere. Detective Toldo engaged in conversation with Gonzalez while Turner and Wochik spoke to the twins. When Detective Gil Toledo inquired about the whereabouts of Gonzalez's children's mother, it caught him off guard. Nevertheless, he provided an explanation, stating that she had left them years ago. To maintain a sense of normalcy and avoid arousing suspicion, the investigators even commended Gonzalez for being a dedicated single father who actively cared for his children. Officers Linda Turner and Paul Wulch had a different experience during their interview with the twins. They immediately felt a connection with them, as the children appeared sweet and polite despite their living conditions. However, when questioned about their mother, they seemed to have no knowledge or information about her whereabouts, deepening the mystery surrounding her disappearance. Despite their strong desire to take the children into custody immediately, the officers couldn't risk compromising the murder case, so they left without them. Detectives in Las Vegas maintained surveillance on Gonzalez and wiretapped his cell phone. Cooper and Toledo paid a visit to Delia Gonzalez Mora, who resided near Jordan High School in South Los Angeles, in an attempt to gather information about the Musino case. Their hope was that Mora's contact with Gonzalez would shed some light on the situation. However, when questioned, Mora claimed to have no knowledge of Luz and her daughters. Interestingly, just moments after the detectives departed, Mora secretly made a call from a nearby payphone to inform her brother about the investigators' inquiries regarding him and Luz. Unbeknownst to her, the detectives were eavesdropping on the conversation. During the call, Mora offered to drive Gonzalez to Mexico. Concerned that Gonzalez might attempt to flee, the Las Vegas authorities swiftly took action to locate him. They eventually found him at the Boys and Girls Club, where he had gone to pick up his twins. As Gonzalez walked towards his car with his children, the authorities apprehended him. Subsequently, DNA samples were collected from the twins and sent to the Ludic County Crime Lab for analysis. Criminalist Steve Ranteria conducted a comparison between these samples and the bloodstains found at the Musino residence. As a result, Hestinus Lowe Gonzalez was promptly taken into custody, and the twins were placed under protective custody before being transitioned into foster care. It is worth mentioning that Gonzalez's reactions to questions about the Musino case were far from pleasant. Faced with his persistent denials during the interrogation, the detectives resorted to a strategic ruse. They falsely informed Gonzalez that they possessed his DNA, hoping to elicit a reaction. Interestingly, Gonzalez's hand gestures during the interrogation, resembling stabbing motions, raised suspicions. At that point in the investigation, no details regarding the murder method had been made public, making Gonzalez's gesture all the more intriguing. It suggested that he possessed knowledge that only someone closely involved in the crime would have. Despite the mounting suspicions, Gonzalez continued to deny any involvement in the murders of Lowe's and her daughters. However, the detectives were adamant that he would not be allowed to return home. On May 1, 2003, Estanislao Gonzalez, who was 48 years old at the time, was taken into custody under suspicion of committing a triple homicide that had taken place sometime between November 26 and December 4, 1994. Gonzalez's sister Mora was also arrested on suspicion of murder, but the Los Angeles County District Attorney concluded that there was insufficient evidence to press charges against her, resulting in her release from custody. Initially, Estanislao Gonzalez pleaded not guilty to the charges. However, as the trial day drew near, he had a change of heart. Given that this was a capital punishment case, Gonzalez's defense attorney, Jennifer Friedman, initiated discussions with the district attorney's office. Gonzalez expressed his desire to confess to the crimes in order to avoid the death penalty. Friedman later stated that her client entered into the plea agreement out of love for his children. Eventually, a plea deal was reached, and Gonzalez admitted to the 3 murders in a concise one-page statement. As part of the agreement, he was not required to provide specific details about how he committed the murders, but he was obligated to disclose the locations where the victims were disposed of. Gonzalez revealed that he had discarded the bodies of Luz Maria Musino and her daughters in the Nevada desert after killing them. This confession aligned with the police records of the discovery of 3 unidentified female bodies, referred to as Jane Does, back in 1996. On May 26, 1996, a disturbing find was made in an area near Hollywood Boulevard, just outside Las Vegas, when a group of children walking the dog stumbled upon the naked remains of a woman next to a ditch. Local authorities were immediately notified, and to their horror, they uncovered 2 more bodies. Autopsies conducted on the victims revealed that the oldest female was estimated to be between 35 and 50 years old, while the other 2 women were believed to be between 25 and 35 years of age. Tragically, 2 of the women met their demise through strangulation, while the 3rd victim tragically succumbed to suffocation and also suffered a fractured skull. The investigators faced immense difficulty in uncovering any evidence that could help establish the identities of these victims. It is a heart-wrenching reality that Las Vegas served as a common destination for individuals involved in the sex trade from various parts of the world. Due to the lack of identification, these unfortunate deceased women were often referred to as Hollywood Jane Does, a name that implied their potential involvement in sex work. However, following Gonzalez's confession, dental and bone samples from the Jane Does were meticulously examined, ultimately confirming that the remains belonged to Luz Musino and her daughters, Edith and Gabriela. On June 21, 2004, Estanislao Gonzalez faced sentencing for the heinous crimes he had committed. The court handed down 3 consecutive life sentences to him, ensuring that he would never have the possibility of parole. On March 8, 1987, Raymond Demel and his wife Rita Demel were driving back to their seaside residence along Blanco Road near the Salinas River Bridge. After a night of drinking, Raymond, a 49-year-old father of 3 and an Army veteran, pulled over to the roadside and lost consciousness due to excessive alcohol consumption. Rita, his wife, became fearful and desperately sought help. Eventually, she managed to flag down a passing car for assistance. A dark-colored pickup truck parked a short distance away from their car, offering the glimmer of hope during her desperate moment. However, the story was far from over. An hour later, the police received a 911 call. What could have transpired during that 1-hour interval for the couple? Is there a possibility that the motorcyclists played a role in what occurred? Or could there be another factor at play? Monterey County, California is a place of inspiring natural beauty, with picturesque landscapes stretching along the expansive Monterey Bay. Renowned globally for its wealth of marine wildlife and the freshest seafood imaginable, it captivates the hearts of all who visit. However, apart from its natural beauty, the place is also known for its rich history, diverse culture, and vibrant communities, making it a captivating destination for both residents and visitors alike. However, beneath this scenic exterior lies a chilling statistic. The county has a history of over 130 unsolved cases dating back to 1959. Tragically, the case of Ray Demel appeared destined to join this list, casting a shadow over the region's otherwise serene reputation. Raymond Edwin Dell was born on April 30th, 1939, in Olean, Cattaraugus, New York, to the family of Edwin Joseph Demel and Lola Evelyn Hills. His formative years remain largely obscure, much like many aspects of his life's journey. He served in the Army for a period and later settled down with Rita Marie Martinez, raising 3 children in Seaside along Blanco Road. Their family life seemed ordinary, without any remarkable incidents or controversies. However, everything changed on the night of March 8, 1987, for Ray Demel's family. When the distress call came in, the police quickly responded and rushed to the scene. Dana Peterson from the Monterey Bay Police Department, accompanied by her team, arrived to find a golden van parked by the side of the road. Rita, visibly shaken and terrified, clung to her husband Ray, her fear reflected in her eyes. Sadly, it was confirmed that Ray had succumbed to a gunshot wound to the chest. Despite her state of shock, Rita, the sole witness to the incident, managed to speak. Tremblingly, she recounted that the man who had stopped at her desperate plea was the same person who had shot her husband, and the reason behind it was quite simple. It appeared that Ray may have accidentally hit the suspect's vehicle with his van, which angered the suspect. According to Rita, he shouted something along the lines of, "No motherfucker can run into my van," before retrieving an Army-issued Colt 45 and firing 2 rounds through Ray's window, fatally striking him. Detective Peterson believed that the assailant had initially shattered the car's driver's side window with the butt of his gun before proceeding with the fatal shooting. Despite Despite their efforts to gather evidence and identify the true culprit, the police couldn't completely rule out Rita as a potential suspect. With only her testimony and no concrete evidence, her involvement in the investigation remained a point of consideration for law enforcement. In such a critical situation, the authorities couldn't afford to overlook anyone. Upon examining the crime scene, it was confirmed that Peterson's theory was accurate. 2.45 caliber shell casings were found inside the victim's van, supporting the evidence of a close-range attack. In addition to that, Rita's statement was validated when investigators discovered tire tracks from a second vehicle near the victim's car, providing solid evidence to support her. Therefore, they returned to investigating the address book in hopes of uncovering more information about Mormon Baird. From the address book, the detectives managed to locate one of Baird's oldest friends, Ronald Hughes. According to Hughes, he had seen Baird on the day of the crime. He recounted that both of them had attended a party in Salinas. After the party, around 6 p.m., Baird left for a job he had in Marina. This statement contradicted Baird's previous claims. With Hughes, it became increasingly clear that Baird had likely crossed the Salina Bridge at the exact moment when Rita Demmel was desperately seeking help. As this interrogation unfolded and the police were on the brink of obtaining a search warrant for Baird, on the other hand, Rita Demmel had not yet been completely ruled out as a potential suspect. Given her status as the sole witness and the lack of solid evidence, the authorities had reason to closely monitor her as well. However, on March 20, 1987, the police prioritized arranging a meeting with Baird to gather additional information regarding his whereabouts and the circumstances surrounding the discovery of his address book near the murder scene. Unfortunately, during this meeting, Baird chose not to answer any questions and instead opted for legal representation. As a result, the police were unable to extract further information or uncover any potential falsehoods in his statements that could establish his guilt. Regrettably, the case eventually went cold, and for over a decade, it remained unsolved. Rita continued to be a suspect while Baird successfully evaded police questioning. However, after 15 long years in January 2002, Detective De Los Santos had a breakthrough when he managed to reconnect with Hughes, who had been present at the party on the night of the murder. During the interrogation, Hughes disclosed that Baird had arrived at his home with the same gun used in the shooting. Fearing the consequences and unsure of the right course of action, Hughes had asked Baird to hand over the weapon. Locating the murder weapon became crucial, but Detective De Los Santos understood that pressuring Hughes would not yield results. Therefore, he chose a more gentle approach, allowing Hughes to gradually open up during the questioning. With Rita no longer under suspicion after 15 years, the police now only needed to compile all the evidence, create a comprehensive report, and finally bring justice to her family. According to Hughes' recollection, he vividly remembered burying the gun in an Army-style ammo box in a field near a tree at Strum Ranch, close to Old Stage Road. Consequently, Detective De Los Santos, accompanied by Hughes, went to the site. Despite their efforts, they were unable to locate the specific tree that had served as a marker for the buried weapon. To enhance their chances of success, De Los Santos decided to seek assistance from a specialized group called the Treasure Hunter Society of Santa Clara Valley. Within an hour, Warren Whitehead, a member of the society, finally detected a signal on his metal detector near a large oak tree. The military-issued case had flawlessly fulfilled this requirement, preserving Baird's fingerprints on an ammunition box that contained the .45 caliber gun and ammunition. Experts have confirmed that the fatal bullet was indeed fired from the gun, which still had the inscription "Model of the U.S. Army." Interestingly, it was registered to an individual who had reported it missing when he moved from a house in Salinas in 1984. Subsequently, Baird became the next tenant at that location. With the gathered evidence, the police had enough grounds to charge Baird with the murder of Ray Demmel in 1987. Justice was finally within grasp. After a long and arduous 15-year wait, Baird pleaded no contest to second-degree murder and received a sentence of 15 years to life in prison. Ray's wife, Rita, witnessed the sentencing, finding solace as justice was ultimately served. Pontypool, Wales. Homes were roughly 30,000 people, two of which were David and Linda Maggs, who lived together at 11 Lansdowne in Sebastopol. The couple had been together since 1988, but had initially met in 1977. Linda had been raising her two children, Carrie and Andrew, on her own, after her first marriage had ended. She worked incredibly hard to support herself and her children, sometimes working 3 jobs to make it happen. David had also been married twice before. They had been together for many years when they decided to marry, and in August of 2002, they tied the knot. Andrew and Carrie had welcomed David into the family, and the couple looked set to begin the rest of their lives together. 74-year-old Linda had an incredibly active social life. She was the member of a dance group and was often out with her group at dance clubs. She also loved being a grandmother and enjoyed going shopping for clothes with her beloved granddaughter. She took real pride in her home and garden, which was often the center for many social gatherings. Linda was incredibly close to her 2 children, and they shared a tight bond. She was always on hand to help or lend advice whenever needed. Her son Andrew described her as a beautiful, kind lady with a huge heart. Her 71-year-old husband David had worked as an accountant but would later retire. The pair enjoyed traveling together all over the world, including the United States and Australia. However, there was one thing that was a source of contention for the couple: money. Prior to the marriage, David had wanted Linda to sign a prenuptial agreement, but she didn't. She said as they were married, everything should be shared between the 2 of them. However, once they were married, they had separate bank accounts and even paid for their own food if they went out for a meal, something her daughter Carrie thought was odd. David didn't share her busy social life. On the occasions he would go out with Linda to her dance shows and clubs, he wouldn't engage or participate. Instead, he would stand outside the venue and smoke. In 2009, David had become more and more reclusive, as he had had his driver's license taken away due to having epilepsy. Over the next few years, their marriage continued to decline. They would often argue over money, and neighbors could hear them fighting in the back garden. By March of 2020, their relationship had completely broken down. When coronavirus hit and lockdown orders were issued, David rang his GP and was prescribed sleeping tablets and antidepressants. His sister was concerned for him and said he was failing to look after himself properly. She would often bring him food and check on him. His day-to-day life consisted of playing cards, watching films, and smoking. He had been in ill health for several years, having survived 2 heart attacks and spending 5 months in hospital, as well as suffering from emphysema. Lockdown was also very hard for Linda. Having previously enjoyed a busy and active social life, not being able to see anyone meant she spent most days upstairs alone. After his heart attack in 2019, he was referred to a counselor. He was given an anxiety and depression score of 12, with anything over 8 being grounds for a referral. In August, he requested that his antidepressants were increased, and after this he said he was feeling much better. But in September 2020, another argument between the pair would do further damage to their already difficult relationship. David had called his sister one night and said they had been arguing again and asked her to go to the house. She said when she got there, it was clear that Linda was very stressed. The argument had once again been about money. Linda had shouted, "It's over, it's done." And David had replied, "Just go," before going back into the house. 3 days later, Linda apologized to David's sister for the argument. On the 16th of September 2020, Linda decided to start divorce proceedings and officially end her marriage to David, citing unreasonable behavior. After consulting a lawyer, she was advised not to leave the home, and David would also not move out. So they continued living together, but the pair were living separate lives, with Linda refusing to clean up after him or cook for him. David had the downstairs turned into a bed set with a lock on his door, and Linda had the upstairs. While she had purchased locks for her doors, she was yet to have them fitted. As they shared a bathroom and kitchen, Linda said she felt as though she was being stalked by him. He would often sit outside the bathroom while she was in the shower and wait for her to come out. An estate agent would go and look at the house and value it. He described David as chain-smoking and visibly shaking. David told the estate agent he would rather hurt his wife than lose anything. The estate agent described Linda as being very timid. When it became clear that the house could be sold as part of the divorce, in November of 2020, David was put in touch with a housing support worker who encouraged him to look into sheltered accommodation and renting as options for if the house sold. He expressed the same sentiment to the housing officer that he had to the estate agent. Linda was not going to get anything, even if it meant she came to harm. He told the support worker that he needed to go to the police as he had thought about stabbing Linda. The support worker was so concerned that she spoke to her line manager, who advised her to call the police on the non-emergency number and also contact his doctor. The doctor phoned David that day and increased his sleeping pills and antidepressants. After the support worker had contacted them, the police went to the house to speak to the couple. When David's sister answered the door, she said she was in shock. She said the police explained that they were concerned for David's mental health, a sentiment she shared, saying he was a wreck and very depressed. David said he was surprised that she had contacted the police but understood why she had. He said he felt the police didn't listen to him and that their visit wasn't worth it. An officer spoke to Linda, saying there were concerns for her safety. The officer said she was quite flippant and thought it was just his way of trying to get her out of the house, as the house was solely in his name. The officer said Linda declined a domestic violence risk assessment and the option of a safe house, saying that David had never laid a finger on her. The officer told her to avoid arguments with him and keep her phone close to her. No further action was taken. By the new year, the pair were no longer speaking. Financial investigators had been brought on board to look into the couple's finances. This meant that the house would likely be put on the market for sale. On the 5th of February 2021, Linda was on the phone to her daughter Carrie. She told Carrie that she was worried about how David would react when he found out their finances were being examined. That same day, David's sister had called him at around 9 p.m. She said he seemed settled and was enjoying watching a film. As officers and other emergency services descended on the scene, body cameras captured the moment they went inside the house as the officer enters. 2 knives can be seen on the last step of the staircase. David's coldness was apparent. He told the officers, 30 years I've been married to her and she doesn't know how to keep her mouth shut. So I topped her. As the devastating news broke, the community could not believe what had happened. Flowers were left outside the home and Linda's children were being supported by officers as they faced this horrifying new reality. The truth about what exactly had happened that morning would soon come out. Even though the upstairs was Linda's domain, David had gone up there and taken 2 large red kitchen knives with him, leaving one outside the bedroom door, and he took the other one into her room at around 9 a.m. As Linda lay in bed under the sheets, her estranged husband walked into her room. David told her he wanted to talk about their separation and impending divorce, but she told him that that conversation needed to be left to the lawyers and she wasn't going to discuss it with him. David became enraged. In a frenzied attack, he stabbed her multiple times. Linda, who was 4'10", had suffered an appalling catalog of injuries. She had been stabbed 15 times in the neck, head, stomach, and chest. Her arms and hands had defensive wounds, showing that she had tried to fight him off with everything she had. She had also sustained 2 broken ribs. One stab wound to her chest was 15.5 centimeters. When trying to understand what had led to this, officers learned that David had become consumed with the idea that Linda had been hiding money from him and that she was going to cheat him out of money during the divorce. As was seen in the body cam footage, he told the officers that she had tried to steal 2 houses from him. Investigations were carried out into the couple's finances to see if there was any evidence of Linda hiding money from him or of her trying to dishonestly get more money in the divorce. They found none, but they did find that David had a savings account with £14,000 in there, something he had failed to declare. He admitted to having killed her, but said that he had blacked out and couldn't remember. He told the investigators during his interviews that whilst he had taken the knives upstairs with him, he had only intended to discuss the finances and the divorce. He said he had left one outside the door in case he needed it. He said, "She's only 4'10", but she can be a right madam." The police soon learned about his history of threatening to harm Linda, and soon another witness would come forward with a worrying story to tell. A lady named Pamela had been one of Linda's friends, and then she had become friends with the couple before her falling out meant she only spoke to David. Pamela had contacted the investigators on the 18th of February and explained that just a few weeks before Linda was killed, she had been on the phone with David and asked him how the divorce process was going. She said he replied, "I feel like I could stab her." She said to him that would mean he would go to prison. His response, "I don't care." He was remanded in custody. On the 8th of February, he appeared at Newport Crown Court, charged with murder. He entered a plea of guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, adamant that he had blanked out. Judge Michael Fritton would preside over the trial at Cardiff Crown Court, which began on the 11th of January 2022. Fritton told the jury, "It's admitted David Maggs killed Linda Maggs, but there is a dispute about the circumstances in which he killed her. There's a dispute about his mental state on the day he killed her, and there's a dispute about his responsibility for killing her." Defense lawyer Sarah Jones argued that Maggs' mental health and depression would have clouded his judgment that day. Evidence of his past health clearly points to something very wrong with his functioning at the time. "I accept it does not excuse what he has done," she said. Psychiatrist Dr. Nuhangalapathy told the jury, "In my opinion, the degree of his impairment due to depression is significant. This is a case where there are clear and significant mental health problems. In my opinion, this is a case of diminished responsibility." But there wasn't a clear medical consensus. As another psychiatrist, Dr. Thomas Wynne, said he didn't think David Maggs had depression. The court heard that David felt he had been stung by his 2 previous ex-wives and was adamant that Linda was not going to get any of his money. The prosecution told the jury that Linda was upset, scared, and anxious. She told a friend she didn't know what her husband was capable of. A friend told the court that Linda had explained they had argued when David had changed his will several years prior, cut her out of it completely, and decided to leave everything to his son. The witness said, "About 5 years ago they were arguing about the will. She said she had to pick up an iron to defend herself." The witness also said she had spoken to Linda the night before her death and they had talked about the divorce, with Linda saying she thought he would lose his temper but added that he wouldn't hurt her and in any case, she could call the police. The prosecution said that David had given Linda an allowance of £30 a week and told her, "No sex, no marriage, no nothing," meaning financially she would be solely reliant on her pension to get by. It was argued that David would become verbally abusive towards Linda and would insult her, calling her thick and stupid. Other key witnesses would address the court, the estate agent and housing officer who would witness David's behavior and heard him make threats towards her life. This painted a very different image from the frail man who was wheelchair-bound and struggled to get in and out of the prison van. David's sister also testified about the argument the couple had had in the garden in September of 2020, saying that Linda had been the one to lose her temper, and that she had never seen her brother use threats of violence until that altercation. The prosecution lawyer called Linda's death a vicious and repeated attack. After a day and a half of deliberations, the jury had reached their verdict on February 1st, 2022. The jury rejected his defense of diminished responsibility, and he was found guilty of the murder of his wife. On the 17th of March, 71-year-old David Maggs was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years that he must serve behind bars. His defense lawyer Sarah Jones said that due to his health and age, however long his sentence was, he would likely die in prison. She said he had asked her to tell the court how sorry he was and that he wished it had never happened. When sentencing him, Judge Michael Fritton called David a self-centered, self-interested, bitter, and unpleasant man. You would come to resent Linda in a whole variety of ways. You resented her still having a life, a social life, female friends, loving members of family. You resented her having the courage to stick up for herself and start divorce proceedings against you. "I don't think you care about anyone other than yourself," he said. During the sentencing hearing, Linda's son Andrew gave a victim impact statement. "You claim you can't remember anything, but I don't believe you. When you do remember, I hope it torments you as it torments us. On your wedding day, I made a speech and welcomed you into the family. I wish I had never, ever said those words. Throughout this whole process, you have not shown a single ounce of remorse, regret, or compassion. That does not surprise me. Mom always said you would never, ever say sorry." Andrew also added that Linda's headstone used her maiden name of Minahan and not her married name of Maggs. For Linda's heartbroken loved ones, Being denied the chance to say goodbye was devastating. Having such a kind and devoted woman ripped away from them in the most horrendous of circumstances has left a void that will never be filled. Linda's memory will continue to live on through those who knew and loved her, and she will always be remembered as a devoted mother, grandmother, and friend. August 20th, 1987 marked a tragic day for North Greenbush, as the lifeless body of a young woman was found on the muddy banks of the Hudson River. This unfortunate victim was later identified as Diana Disso, a 19-year-old who had been seen leaving her boyfriend's Albany apartment in a distressed state the previous evening. While the identification process was swift, the investigation into her murder proved to be a lengthy and challenging endeavor, spanning a daunting 17-year period. To unravel the mystery surrounding this chilling incident, we must retrace our steps to the very location where it all began. North Greenbush, situated in upstate New York, is a charming town renowned for its picturesque beauty. Nestled along the eastern banks of the Hudson River, this suburban community offers a serene and family-oriented environment. With a population of just over 13,000, North Greenbush embodies the essence of small-town living. However, even in such an idyllic setting, dark secrets can lurk beneath the surface, serving as a reminder that no place is immune to the presence of heinous crimes. On that fateful day, August 20th, 1987, the New York State Police Department received a distress call from a concerned passerby who had stumbled upon a lifeless body on the banks of the Hudson River in North Greenbush, New York. John Murray, a seasoned homicide detective from the NYSP, promptly responded to the call, making his way down the trails leading to the river. As he approached the scene, he was met with the sight of a motionless woman lying face down, partially submerged in the water, her body resting upon the muddy embankment of the Hudson River. During the initial examination, all indications pointed towards a homicide. It seemed that someone had intentionally tried to dispose of the victim's body in the river, but their plan was thwarted when it got caught on a piece of wood near the riverbank. The detective was disheartened to find no identifying information except for a brush. An urgent bulletin was promptly issued, and the news was broadcasted on local television channels. Detective Murray held on to hope that someone would step forward to identify this unfortunate victim. Marion Disso, a resident of Colony, New York, found watching the news on television particularly distressing as she hadn't heard from her 19-year-old daughter, Diana Disso, since the previous night. Fearing the worst, the family contacted the police, who connected them with the investigators working on the Hudson River case, initiating the identification process. Once the identification was completed, the investigators eagerly awaited the autopsy results for further insights. The report confirmed that Diana had been strangled and also revealed the presence of unidentified bodily fluid on her body, along with possible signs of assault. Unfortunately, no additional evidence pertaining to the killer could be obtained. Detectives even tried to retrace Diana's steps before her murder. It was discovered that on the evening of August 19th, 1987, Diana had a heated argument with her undisclosed boyfriend. In a fit of anger, she stormed out of his apartment in Albany, New York. Sadly, this was the last time anyone saw her alive. Although the boyfriend was not considered a suspect, the detectives were unable to identify any other individuals on their list of suspects. Consequently, the case eventually went cold, leaving her grieving family longing for justice. In 2004, a remarkable 17 years after the discovery of Diana Disso's, the case was reopened by Dave Madden, a senior investigator from the New York State Police Department. By this point in time, advancements in DNA technology had progressed enough for Madden to send the unidentified bodily fluid sample to the New York State Police Crime Lab for further examination. Dr. Allison Eastman, a forensic analyst with the New York Police, conducted thorough tests and successfully generated a complete STR-DNA profile from the sample. On May 24, 2004, she entered the profile into Cody's, leading to a groundbreaking revelation. Not only did the profile already exist in the database, but the individual associated with it was already serving time in prison. The bodily fluid matched that of a convicted felon named Ray Killer. Although Killer had no apparent connection to Diana, His criminal history made him a prime suspect in this case. In 1989, Keller had committed a violent assault against a 16-year-old girl, resulting in a prison sentence of 8 to 25 years. Following this significant breakthrough, Dave Madden joined forces with two other NYSP detectives, Steve Ortiz and Deborah Comer, to pursue this lead. Before directly engaging with the suspect, the detectives decided to first speak with the now-adult victim of Keller's previous crime. While she had survived the attack, it shared unsettling similarities with Diana Disso's murder, which had occurred just 2 years earlier. Both victims had been assaulted and strangled. Although there was no direct link between these two cases, the importance of Keller's conviction cannot be overstated in relation to Diana's murder. Without it, Keller's DNA may have never been present in the system. Armed with substantial evidence connecting Ray Killar to Diana's case, investigators were ready to interrogate him about her murder. However, they still needed his confession to strengthen their case. There was a possibility that Killar could claim to have had a personal relationship with Diana, but deny any involvement in her murder. Prior to directly approaching Ray Killar, the detectives sought guidance from psychologist Richard Hamill, who had spent 20 years conversing with convicts. They were hopeful that Hamill's expertise would assist them in delving into Ray Killar's psyche and encouraging him to open up about the case. On December 17, 2004, Detective Madden and Ortiz conducted an interview with Ray Killar. The detectives explicitly informed him that they were aware of his encounter with Diana Disso in 1987, but Killar denied recognizing the name. Despite Killar's repeated denials and lies, forensic evidence clearly placed him at the scene with Diana. Therefore, when the detectives decided to reveal the trump card they held, the DNA evidence, Keller finally broke down. With the audio recording in progress, Keller recounted the events of August 1987 when Diana Disso tragically lost her life. Keller admitted that on that August evening, 17 years prior, he was under the influence of both alcohol and drugs. He stated that while driving around, noticed a young woman hitchhiking along Central Avenue in Albany and chose to pull over. Keller then drove the car to a wooded area in North Greenbush near the Hudson River. After assaulting the vulnerable young woman, Keller unexpectedly allowed her to get dressed. However, it was a comment made by Diana Disso at that moment that may have tragically sealed her fate. She mentioned that she was going to tell. Keller went on to explain that he was consumed by rage and continued to tighten his grip on Diana's neck until she stopped resisting. Convinced that she would succumb to his attack, Keller decided to dispose of her lifeless body in the river. Through a combination of patience and effective interrogation techniques, detectives Madden and Ortiz achieved the confession they had been seeking, just as psychologist Hamill had predicted. Rensselaer County District Attorney Patricia Dangels and Deputy District Attorney Joe Abelov, who handled the prosecution, were dedicated to obtaining justice for Diana's family above all else. In 2005, Ray Keller ultimately pleaded guilty to second-degree murder before Rensselaer County Court Judge Patrick J. McGrath. He was sentenced to 22 years to life in state prison on July 5, 2005, with the term to be served consecutively to his previous sentence. Although he appeared remorseful, the harsh truth remains that he cannot reverse the tragic loss of Diana or erase the suffering he caused her family. On December 15, 1980, 31-year-old Melanie Urad embarked on her usual journey to the Pacoma Hospital in California, where she worked as a nurse. Little did she know that this seemingly ordinary workday would take a sinister turn. At a stoplight, a witness observed two men forcefully entering Melanie's pickup truck, abducting her against her will. Tragically, this would be the last time anyone saw her alive. The question remains, who were these two men, and what could have motivated them to commit such a heinous act? Pacoima, California, a town deeply rooted in history and natural beauty, derives its name from the Tataviam language, meaning entrance. Established by farmers of Mayan descent around 1500, Pacoima was named after a small stream. The Two Brothers Rock Formation, a unique Southern California landmark shaped by an underground river, adds to the town's charm. Founded by two brothers known for their healing practices, Pacoima now boasts one of the cleanest water supplies in the nation, sourced from natural springs. With a population of around 77,000 in 2020, the town sees common petty crimes like property theft and robberies, but hardly any cases of assault or murder. This is where our victim, Melanie Uribe, was based. Born on September 9, 1948, Melanie was 31 years old in 1980 when the incident occurred. She worked as a nurse at Pacama Hospital in Burbank, California, after marrying young and becoming a single mother to her 8-year-old son following the divorce. Described as a hard worker who was always willing to help others, Melanie was dedicated to providing her son with a comfortable life. She rarely missed a shift at work, which raised concerns when she failed to show up on December 15, 1980. Despite attempts to contact her, no one knew her whereabouts. On that fateful night, Melanie never made it to the hospital, prompting worries about her sudden disappearance. The Los Angeles Police Department was notified, fearing the worst. The search for Melanie was in full swing, but it lacked any clear direction or useful information, making it feel like a futile endeavor. However, the following morning, the police made a significant discovery when they found Melanie's burnt truck. The puzzling part was that there were no signs of an accident or any trace of Melanie's whereabouts. It wasn't until an anonymous witness came forward with a crucial piece of information that the case took a different turn. According to the witness, they saw two men forcefully enter Melanie's truck while she was stopped at a red light on her way to work. This revelation transformed the investigation from a missing person case to an abduction case. However, before the focus could fully shift to Melanie's disappearance, another woman named Etta Smith captured everyone's attention. Etta, an employee at an aerospace company, had a regular day at work until she heard about Melanie's case on the radio. Strangely enough, upon hearing the news, she had a sudden vision of Melanie and claimed that Melanie was not being held captive in any house. This psychic experience was a first for Etta, leaving her both certain and astonished. Described the vision as a vivid movie playing in her mind, depicting a canyon, a winding road, shrubbery, hills in the background, and a dirt path leading to something white. Etta believed that the white object symbolized Melanie's nurse's uniform, which she wore when leaving for work. Detective Lee Ryan, assigned to the case, initially had doubts about Etta's credibility as a businesswoman. However, Etta reached out to him, sharing her vision and her belief that Melanie's body would be found in a remote area of the San Fernando Valley called Lopez Canyon, above Lakeview Terrace. Although uncertain about Melanie's condition, Etta was convinced that this was the location where she would be discovered. After reporting her vision to the police, Etta was taken aback when she met with the detectives the next day to search the area she had seen in her vision using a helicopter. However, instead of waiting for the police, she decided to search for Melanie with a small group of family members. As she drove up the canyon, she felt a strong and distinct sensation, an emotional upheaval that indicated Melanie's presence. This feeling became even stronger in her mind, compelling her to navigate the canyon once again. When she noticed recent tire marks, the same inner turmoil resurfaced, and she sensed a connection between the vehicle and the unfolding events. As they ventured deeper into the canyon near Lakeview Terrace, they stopped again when Etta's daughter spotted something unusual in the foliage. Etta was drawn towards it and came face to face with a figure wearing white nurse's shoes, mirroring the landscape from her earlier visions. The autopsy confirmed that the body was indeed Melanie Uribe, revealing the grim story of robbery, assault, and ultimately, murder. Etta's earlier vision aligned perfectly with the forensic findings. Despite this confirmation, the identity of the perpetrators remained unknown. Unfortunately, suspicion began to fall on Etta in light of these developments. Consequently, on the evening following the discovery of Melanie's body, Etta found herself being arrested. The detectives were genuinely suspicious of how she had prior knowledge of the case. Despite being subjected to extensive questioning, Etta consistently maintained her innocence. After hours of interrogation, they decided to administer a polygraph test. Although she successfully passed the test, the detectives informed her that one of them had provided sworn testimony alleging deceptive behavior, including an attempt to manipulate her breathing. Law enforcement began to consider the possibility that if Etta wasn't directly involved in the crime, She may have obtained her information through neighborhood gossip or someone who had knowledge of the details but was unwilling to come forward. It was speculated that her alleged vision may have been motivated by a desire for financial gain. However, a more compassionate interpretation could attribute her failure on the polygraph test to the psychological impact of the traumatic vision and the subsequent search for the body. Nevertheless, she found herself in a perplexing situation, possessing detailed knowledge of the body's whereabouts from an unlikely source. As a result, she was officially charged with murder the following morning. On December 18, 1980, she was arrested and held barefoot in a cell. For 24 hours, she was deprived of food and water, with the police hoping she would break and confess to the crime. Etta remained in custody for a total of 4 days, without any communication or contact. It was during this time that a witness came forward to the LAPD and confessed to overhearing 21-year-old Luis Carna Morgan, 21-year-old Spencer Nelson, and an unnamed 17-year-old man boasting about killing Melanie. They were subsequently arrested and confessed to the crime shortly after. Upon their confession, Etta Smith was released from custody. On December 21, 1980, the trio admitted to taking advantage of an opportunity at a stoplight. They forcibly entered Miss Yurov's truck and directed her towards a desolate canyon located 15 miles north of her home. There, they subjected her to unspeakable acts of violence, robbing, assaulting, and brutally beating her as she begged for her life. The ultimate act of cruelty resulted in her death, caused by blunt force trauma inflicted by a large rock. The wheels of justice turned, leading to the conviction of these attackers, who are now serving time in prison. The extraordinary circumstances surrounding Melanie Uribe's case raised questions about the validity of information obtained through inexplicable means. To this day, there is no explanation as to how Etta witnessed and knew the location of a victim with whom she had no connection. A vision without justice would likely remain unfulfilled. Limited details are available regarding the motive behind targeting Melanie. Despite numerous theories, definitive answers remain elusive. As this captivating story comes to a close, we'd encourage you to participate in the discussion. Was Etta's premonition a remarkable stroke of luck, or simply a random occurrence? How do you view the delicate balance between doubt and instinct that played out in Melanie's situation? Do you believe that psychics have a role to play in criminal investigations? Our next case takes us to Galt, a city situated in Sacramento County, California. Galt offers its residents a quiet suburban setting, and it is worth mentioning that the majority of the people living in this community are homeowners. It is in Galt that the story of Lucille Hochran unfolds. Not much is known about Lucille's early life, but it is documented that she and her husband, Frank Hochran, moved to Galt from Idaho in 1968. They were proud parents to 2 children, Frank and Henry. By the late 1970s, their sons had grown up and moved away, but Lucille and Frank chose to remain in the neighborhood. They were known for their kindness and affection, treating the children in the area as if they were their own grandchildren. Sean Jacobs, a former neighbor of the Holcrans, shared that they were open-hearted and welcoming. He fondly remembered being invited into their home during the summer, where they generously offered cookies and lemonade. Sean emphasized that he had never heard a single unkind word from Luju. According to others who knew Luju, she led a simple and humble life. She held a strong devotion to her family and her place of worship, Galt's First Methodist Church. Neighbors affectionately described her as a typical grandmother figure, often spending long hours tending to her garden. However, a significant change occurred in November 1985 when Lucille's husband, Frank, was admitted to a nursing home. As a result, Lucille found herself living alone in the company of her cats. Tragically, almost 2 years later, in October 1987, Frank passed away, succumbing to Alzheimer's disease. This loss deeply affected their entire family. In the midst of these challenging times, Lucille continued to navigate her life on her own. Yet, fate had another tragedy in store. On Friday, May 20th, 1988, Lucille celebrated her 79th birthday, unaware that it would be her last. On the following Sunday, May 22nd, the absence of Lucille from church caused concern among her fellow church members, as she was known to be a regular attendee. The day after, on May 23rd, of Lucille's friends decided to visit her and check on her well-being. They entered her home through a partially open sliding glass door and were shocked to discover Lucille's lifeless body in her bedroom. It was a tragic sight as the elderly lady had fallen victim to a brutal crime, having been stabbed, assaulted, and strangled to death. The state of her body indicated that some time had passed since her demise, adding to the distressing nature of the situation. Deeply alarmed by what they had found, the friends immediately rushed to the Gulf Police Department to report the horrifying scene. The police promptly responded and initiated an investigation into this tragic incident. Upon arrival, the responding officers noticed visible injuries on Lucille's chest. Interestingly, nothing seemed to be missing from her small one-bedroom home, leading investigators to rule out robbery as a motive. Determining the exact time of Lucille's death posed an initial challenge for the detectives. Initially, they believed she had been deceased for up to a week, considering the extent of decomposition. However, friends clarified that they had seen or spoken to Lucille just 3 days before her body was discovered. Subsequent autopsy reports revealed that Lucille had died from 2 fatal stab wounds to her chest. This heinous crime left Lucille's neighbors deeply alarmed, prompting them to take measures to enhance their security, such as locking doors and windows at night and implementing additional safety precautions to protect their families. Throughout the investigation conducted by the Gulf Police, several witnesses, including neighbors, family members, and church acquaintances, were identified and interviewed. The Sacramento County Sheriff's Office crime scene investigators provided valuable assistance by gathering a substantial amount of evidence from the scene. Despite extensive efforts and collaboration, the police were unable to definitively identify a suspect, even though fingerprints were collected by agents from the California Department of Justice and nail scrapings were successfully preserved from Lucille's body for potential future testing. As time passed, the leads grew colder and the case remained unsolved, leaving the community grappling with uncertainty and many unanswered questions. However, after over 30 years, technology finally caught up. And in January 2022, the county crime lab revisited the DNA evidence that had been stored for decades. Surprisingly, it was the fingernail scrapings that proved to be the key in cracking the case. Detectives entered the DNA profile derived from the genetic material found in the scrapings into the database, leading to a significant breakthrough. The profile matched an individual named Terry Leroy Bramble, who was revealed to have been a longtime resident and transient in Gulf. Terry had a history of criminal convictions and had spent years living on the city streets, often beneath the Highway 99 overpass. Unfortunately, Terry passed away in 2011 at the age of 55 due to natural causes. Interestingly, during the initial investigation into Lucille's death in 1988, Terry had not surfaced as a suspect, according to police records. With both the suspect and Terry now deceased, investigators were left without the means to uncover the motive behind the crime or how Terry and Lucille may have crossed paths prior to her untimely death. Despite the lack of accountability for Lucille's murderer, officials from the Gulf Police expressed their satisfaction in finally being able to close the case. Although the questions surrounding the motive and circumstances remained unanswered, there was a sense of closure and resolution after more than 30 years of uncertainty. During a news conference, Sacramento County District Attorney and Marie Stubbart conveyed a statement on behalf of Lucille's surviving son, Henry Hochran, who expressed his sentiments. He disclosed his relief that the case had ultimately been resolved, but also expressed his desire for the responsible individual to still be alive to face the consequences of their actions. Henry emphasized that while this development provided some answers, it could never truly bring closure, due to the lasting impact of the tragedy on their lives. On August 30th, 2010, Broward Sheriff's Office deputies responded to a call of a suspicious incident at 1386 Northeast 34th Street in Oakland Park, Florida. When they arrived, they discovered a man lying face down with a gunshot wound. The victim was identified as Alfred McMurray. Alfred's vehicle and other items of his were missing from the home. Investigators were able to collect forensic evidence from the crime scene, including items obtaining DNA from the culprit. Detectives conducted numerous interviews and did tests on the items, but were unable to identify a clear suspect. Alfred's 2006 silver Toyota Tacoma pickup truck that was stolen was found at a Lauderhill apartment complex in the 4400 block of Northwest 19th Street. Alfred's mother, June McMurray, had this to say about her son. From a little kid, he never met a stranger. Everybody was his friend. Alfred's girlfriend of 1 year said, "To know Alfred was to love Alfred. He was full of life and he loved everyone he encountered." So for people to know there's people out there who have done something like this to him is not comprehensible. When I think of just the little moments, going out to eat, going grocery shopping, I'll never have that with him. His family will never have that with him. It's just a lot of sadness right now. I know whoever did this is somebody's child. I want them to know that although I have forgiven them, they still have to pay for their actions. In May of 2022, new information led investigators to identify a possible suspect, Aaron Michael Dobbins. A search warrant for Dobbins' DNA and subsequent testing found that his DNA matched the evidence gathered 12 years ago. Detectives determined Dobbins lived in Oakland Park during the time of the crime and knew Alfred through Dobbins' roommate. Investigators said that based on the information gathered and the evidence collected in this case, they believe Dobbins is responsible for taking Alfred's life. Dobbins was arrested in Hillsborough County, Florida on September 22nd of 2022. He was extradited to Broward County. He is being held without bond in the Broward County main jail. Investigators believe robbery could be the motive, but it's also possible to be drugs, as Alfred was a user. 36-year-old Renee McRae lived in Inverness, Scotland in 1976. She was married to Gordon McRae, though the two of them were separated. Renee had two sons, 9-year-old Gordon and 3-year-old Andrew. She was described as a devoted mother. On November 12th of 1976, Renee left her home with both of her sons. She dropped Gordon at her estranged husband's house. Thereafter, she turned south on the A9, which is a major road in Scotland. The apparent plan was to visit her sister and kill Marnick. That was the last time Renee and her son Andrew were seen alive. Later that same night, a train driver spotted Renee's burning BMW in an isolated lay-by. When the police arrived at the scene of the vehicle, it was charred and empty apart from a rug stained with blood matching Renee's blood type. What followed was an extensive investigation. Renee and Andrew's disappearance became notorious in Scotland. Investigators concluded that the two of them were not alive anymore and that the culprit had made careful plans and had disposed of the bodies without leaving any clues. Witnesses on the A9 reported seeing a man dragging something they thought was a sheep, not far from where the car was found. Interestingly, was reported to have been wearing a sheepskin coat when she disappeared. As police investigated, it became apparent that Renee's personal life was not straightforward. In 1971, unbeknownst to her husband Gordon, Renee began to have an affair with William McDowell. William worked for Gordon McRae as an accountant and company secretary. He was married with 2 children. Nobody knew about the affair except Renee's best friend, Valerie Steventon. Valerie revealed that Renee had not been planning to visit her sister that night, but intended to travel to Perthshire to visit William McDowell. Investigators also learned that Renee's youngest son, Andrew's father, was McDowell and not her husband, Gordon McRae. Renee had first confided to her friend Valerie about her conducting an affair in spring of 1973 when she had been pregnant with Andrew. William McDowell admitted to their affair, but has not spoken about the case since then, except to deny any involvement. The revelation of Renee's 4-year affair led investigators to admit that the case was mired in a sea of deceit and untruthfulness from the start. Detective Sergeant John Cathcart coordinated the search, and after 8 months he had a breakthrough. While excavating Dalmagare Quarry, he was hit by a stench after removing a layer of topsoil. He was convinced it was the sign of corpses, so he continued digging. Unfortunately, he was not able to find anything conclusive and the case went cold. In 2004, investigators decided to take another look after a documentary renewed interest in the case throughout Scotland. Also, in 2004, Chief Constable Ian Latimer launched a cold case review, which led to £122,000 being spent on an excavation of Dalmagare Quarry. Over the course of 3 weeks, in August 2004, 20,000 tons of earth from the quarry had been excavated and 2,000 trees were removed. All that was found were 2 crisp packets, some men's clothing and rabbit bones. By August 2006, £250,000 has been spent reinvestigating the case. More recently, the investigation focused on the possibility that the bodies were buried under the A9 road. The A9 was in the middle of a major program of upgrading at the time of the disappearance. An 80-year-old farmer using his supernatural powers claimed that the bodies were under the A9. He marked the spot with a yellow circle. A spokeswoman from Northern Constabulary said that after studying aerial photographs taken by the Royal Air Force during the construction of the A9, they were satisfied the bodies were not buried under the road. Finally, in September 2019, detectives from Police Scotland's major investigation team arrested 77-year-old William McDowell in connection with the case. In November of 2021, the 80-year-old McDowell was adjudged fit to stand trial, which took place in Inverness in 2022. Then, in September of 2022, more than 45 years after the disappearance, McDowell was found guilty of taking the lives of Renee and Andrew McRae. He was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years in prison. Lots of little pieces of evidence against McDowell was provided during the trial. A witness said McDowell was seen scrubbing the trunk of his car days following Renee and Andrew's disappearance. A convicted criminal said that he was paid cash to douse Renee and Andrew with acid by William McDowell. It was also revealed that McDowell has made 4 statements to the police. In one statement, he admitted that he was responsible but later changes his story. Another witness claimed that she saw a man who she thinks is McDowell in the area Renee's burning car was found. Detective Chief Inspector Brian Geddes had this to say following the conviction: "Renee and Andrew's family and friends have waited decades for justice, and I hope that the outcome in court today provides some form of closure for them. They have carried themselves with absolute dignity throughout, and they are very much in my thoughts today." Let's travel back to Muskegon, Michigan, where Amanda Grace Byers Blackburn was born on July 31, 1987 to Phil and Robin Bagars. Following her birth, her family relocated to Indianapolis, Indiana, where she began her education before eventually moving to Elkhart, Indiana in 1995. In 2006, Amanda successfully graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy. Amanda's life took a significant turn when she met Davy Blackburn on a blind date at a Christian rock concert. Their connection was immediate. In 2008, Amanda completed her studies at Pensacola Christian College in Pensacola, Florida, earning an associate's degree. That same year, she and Davy exchanged vows. For 4 years, the couple resided in South Carolina, where Davy served as an assistant pastor at New Spring Church. However, in 2012, Amanda and Davy decided to embark on a new chapter in their lives by relocating to Indianapolis. Their aim was to establish an independent church, Resonate Church, on the north side of the city. The year 2014 brought another significant moment as they welcomed their first child, a son named Weston. At this point, it seemed that life was thriving and the couple was content. However, tragedy was lurking nearby. On November 10, 2015, Davy's day began at around 4:30 a.m. He started by reading his Bible and then proceeded to the gym at approximately 6 o'clock a.m. Before leaving, he left the door unlocked since they only had one house key, which happened to be on his wife's key ring. Davy's workout session lasted for about an hour. Upon returning home, he engaged in a phone conversation with a friend. To avoid disturbing his wife and son, he remained in the driveway until after 8 a.m. He finally entered the house. He was met with a distressing scene. Amanda was lying unconscious and bleeding near the fireplace and Christmas tree. She was unclothed and face down. Davy immediately called 911 for assistance. Fortunately, their 1-year-old child was unharmed and safely in his crib at home. Regrettably, Amanda succumbed to her injuries within 48 hours of the incident. An autopsy confirmed that she had sustained a gunshot wound to her head, leading to her death being classified as a homicide. Adding to the tragedy, it was discovered that Amanda was 12 weeks pregnant at the time of the attack. The authorities attributed the incident to a home invasion, which sparked an intense pursuit of suspects. In late November 2015, the police apprehended two individuals, Jalen Watson, 21 years old, and Diana Gordon, 24 years old, in connection with the case. Subsequently, in December 2015, an 18-year-old named Larry Taylor was also taken into custody as a third suspect. The charges brought against them included murder and robbery. However, there was a significant development when Watson and Gordon entered into plea agreements. As part of these agreements, prosecutors agreed to drop several charges, including the murder charge. In addition to pleading guilty, both Watson and Gordon made a commitment to testify against the third suspect, Taylor, during the subsequent bench trial, and they honored this commitment. Their testimonies provided crucial insights into the events that unfolded on the morning of Amanda's tragic shooting. Both men confessed to being involved in 3 burglaries that occurred in the early hours of that day. During one of these burglaries, they stole car keys to a silver cross for Severing. This particular residence had a security system that captured images of the 3 burglars. Following this, they drove the stolen car to an apartment on the northwest side, which happened to be in close proximity to the neighborhood where the Blackburn family lived. Watson and Gordon testified that they proceeded to break into a house adjacent to the Blackburn residence through the back patio room. Inside, they stole televisions, a laptop, a bag of oranges, and even a pink sweater. They also consumed alcoholic beverages that they found in the house. The stolen goods were cleverly concealed by placing the televisions in the trunk of the stolen car, which had been parked in the garage. Shortly after, Taylor informed them that he had witnessed a man leaving the neighboring house. This prompted them to choose that house as their next target for burglary. Unfortunately, it turned out to be Davy's residence. Upon entering the Blackburn house, they stumbled upon a wallet and divided the cash they found among themselves. They also took a credit card. To their surprise, they discovered Amanda and her young son inside. The idea of escorting her to an ATM for cash was discussed, but Amanda adamantly refused and instead dropped to the floor, making it clear she would not leave. Watson and Gordon then decided to leave the residence in the stolen car, leaving Taylor behind at the Blackburn house. Watson revealed that Taylor was armed with a .38 revolver. Watson and Gordon proceeded to visit 2 ATM locations. The first transaction was unsuccessful, but they successfully withdrew $400 in cash from the second ATM. Both admitted that upon their return to retrieve Taylor from the neighborhood, he confessed to taking Amanda's life. Watson further shared that Taylor admitted to attempting to take advantage of Amanda, which resulted in a fatal gunshot to the head when she resisted, and never intended harm to anyone in the homes we targeted, said Watson. Gordon added that in a subsequent conversation with a different group of people, Taylor claimed that Amanda had tried to attack him, leading to the fatal shot in the head. The unfolding details painted a disturbing picture of the events that occurred that day. In 2017, Watson pleaded guilty to robbery and burglary charges, resulting in a 29-year prison sentence. On the other hand, Gordon pleaded guilty in 2018 to charges of robbery resulting in serious bodily injury and burglary. At Gordon's sentencing hearing in September 2022, 2 more victims, Jacqueline Searsbrook and Allison Becker, who had both been victims of burglaries by Gordon, shared their stories. Surprisingly, it wasn't the stolen items during the 2015 burglaries that impacted these victims the most. They highlighted that it was the loss of their feeling of safety and the subsequent mental health struggles that have continued to affect their lives. Gordon was ultimately given a 30-year prison term. The road to securing Taylor's conviction was a difficult one. 2 attempts to prosecute Taylor ended in misrules. The first was declared when a juror found out that Amanda was pregnant, a detail that the judge feared could sway the jury's opinions. Building a case against Taylor was a meticulous process, involving careful selection of witnesses to give testimony. There were also delays in changes in attorneys, partly due to the effects of the pandemic, which contributed to the prolonged progression of the case. Finally, in a bench trial in September 2022, Taylor was convicted of multiple charges, including murder, burglary resulting in serious bodily harm, theft, criminal confinement, auto theft, and carrying a handgun without a license. During the subsequent sentencing hearing, members of Amanda's family showed a level of forgiveness towards Taylor. He was sentenced to 86 years in prison in October 2022. Davy and Amanda's family were relieved by the verdict, with Davy expressing a sense of relief after a lengthy and challenging journey. On the morning of July 14, 1974, the peaceful farming community of Fairfield in southwestern Ohio was greeted by a radiant Sunday. However, this seemingly ordinary day took a tragic turn for 71-year-old Ruth Dounch, a beloved resident of the area. Inside her home's front door, Ruth was discovered lifeless on the floor, a garden axe cruelly embedded in her head. The question that haunted everyone was, could have committed such a heartless crime? What could have motivated the choice of Ruth, a 71-year-old woman, as the victim? Fairfield Township, Ohio, is a serene and tightly knit community nestled in the heart of southwestern Ohio. Its modest population cherishes a peaceful way of life, and the tranquil environment it offers is truly captivating. The vast farmland that stretches across the township adds to its breathtaking beauty. Normally, the overall calmness of the area extends a warm and inviting welcome to both locals and visitors. However, this community was shaken to its core when Ruth Dounch was tragically murdered in 1974, leaving its residents in a state of shock. Ruth M. Dounch, born in 1902 and a native of Ohio, lived a simple life alongside her husband, Paul J. Dounch, in Fairfield Township, as the esteemed principal at Hayes Elementary School. She found fulfillment in her role within the community. Ruth's life was characterized by its lack of controversy and remained a relatively unknown tale, shared only among her closest associates in the tight-knit Fairfield community. In 1973, tragedy struck when her husband Paul passed away at the age of 74. At 70 years old, Ruth was left to navigate life alone. Following her husband's death, she took on the responsibility of managing their 18-acre property, which had several tenants. Little did she know that just 1 year after her husband's passing, at her advanced age, she would face a fate far more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. On the morning of July 14, 1974, a distress call led the police to a horrifying scene. 71-year-old Dounch was discovered lifeless in her own home, just inside the front door. She was partially unclothed, with a garden axe embedded in her head. The lack of significant blood around her head suggested that she was killed before the axe was used. Despite a thorough investigation, no new clues emerged to help move the case forward. Ruth Dounch seemed to be an unfortunate victim of a senseless act of violence. The police struggled to find any connections or motives that could explain why she was targeted in such a brutal and unprovoked manner. Although the crime scene did not provide direct evidence, Detective Deaton made a crucial discovery in Dunst's receipt containing information about the renters on her property. The search for the individuals listed on the receipt began. Among the renters, one name stood out to Detective Deaton: Donald Korn. Donald, a local resident, had been renting Dunst's guest house for over a year. Deaton wasted no time in locating Korn and engaging in a conversation with him. With no evidence pointing to Korn's involvement, the case remained unsolved and eventually went cold. 5 months later, in December 1974, an incident occurred roughly 130 miles southwest of Fredericksburg Township in Jeffersonville, Indiana, putting the police on high alert once again. This time, it involved the case of 54-year-old Dorothy Hendren. It was shortly after dinner, and Dorothy was at home enjoying a moment of relaxation in her chair while watching TV. Little did she realize that this seemingly ordinary evening was about to take a terrifying turn. Out of nowhere, her head was forcefully pulled back, and a knife was pressed against her throat. Despite her pleas for mercy, the intruder callously ignored her pleas and subjected her to a traumatic violation. In a critical moment, Dorothy made the decision to play dead, hoping to protect her life from the heartless intruder. She lay motionless as the intruder, believing her to be lifeless, proceeded to search the house for valuable items before eventually leaving. Summoning all her strength, Dorothy discreetly reached for the telephone and dialed 911. By the time the police arrived, she had already been rushed to the hospital for medical attention. The forensic department arrived at the scene and collected any available evidence, including scattered hair and blood samples found on the floor and chair. Detective Ron Kemp of the Jeffersonville Police Department now faced an anxious wait, hoping for Dorothy's recovery. Fortunately, Dorothy Hendren survived the horrifying ordeal. She provided a detailed description of the intruder and recounted the harrowing events of that night. Despite her cooperation, the police department had no leads to match the description given by Dorothy, leaving the case at a standstill. However, Jeffersonville police remained determined to uncover any new evidence that could lead them to the ruthless intruder. Their perseverance paid off on January 27, 1975, when a breakthrough finally occurred. The police department received a call from Kathy Allen, Dorothy's neighbor, who had valuable information to share regarding the night of the attack. Remarkably, Kathy recognized the person she had seen on that fateful night. He was the individual who had taken Kathy on his lifeboat approximately a month before the incident and assaulted her. Kathy had kept this information to herself until her growing concern compelled her to disclose the identity of the attacker who had targeted her and almost claimed Dorothy's life. It turned out to be none other than Donald Korn. Equipped with this crucial information provided by Kathy Allen, the police promptly took action and apprehended Donald Korn, placing him in a jail cell in Indiana. A search warrant was immediately issued, and the authorities meticulously combed through Korn's houseboat, ultimately uncovering the vile evidence required to build their case. They discovered a pair of shoes that perfectly matched the bloody footprint found at Dorothy's residence. Furthermore, Dorothy's purse, which had been discarded in a nearby river, was recovered alongside Korn's boat. Detective Ron Kemp arranged for Korn to be brought to his office for an interview. With a coffee mug and some food on the table, Kemp initiated the conversation. However, as the interview progressed, Kemp's sharp eye and memory triggered a recollection of an incident from November 1974, the Ruth Donch case. Without hesitation, he redirected the interrogation to Ohio detectives, recognizing the potential connection between the two cases. Armed with Korn's confession, Detective Kemp achieved the closure he sought. The Ohio Police Department, which had been grappling with the unsolved Ruth Donch case, finally obtained some resolution. The confessions seemed to have cracked the case wide open. Nevertheless, despite this apparent progress, challenges and complications loomed ahead. Korn filed appeals based on both confessions, claiming that he had requested an attorney during the interrogation with Kemp, but had been denied one. On the other hand, Kemp refuted that any such request was ever made, leading to a contentious impasse in the argument. In Ohio, despite a seemingly clear confession, legal complexities and regulations hindered the authorities in Butler County. The trial dragged on for 3 years, resulting in a disappointing outcome for both the Ohio Police Department and the Butler County Prosecutor's Office in 1979. Donald Korn's confession was ruled inadmissible, dealing a significant blow to their case. Although Korn received a minimum of 20 years imprisonment in Indiana, he managed to escape justice in Ohio, evading the consequences for his crimes. This left the Fredericksburg Police Department and the people of Ohio in a nightmare, knowing that a killer was still at large. Fast forward to the year 2000, Ohio had progressed, but the unresolved case of Doan's murder continued to haunt the police department. Detective Frank Smith, unwavering in his determination, stumbled upon a lead while reviewing files related to the case: Donald Korn's sister, Louise Amberby. Despite 21 years passing, Detective Smith remained dedicated and pursued this new lead. Louise, who had never contacted the police before, finally broke her silence when Detective Smith approached her. She shared crucial details about her brother's confessions during their visit to him in jail, shedding new light on the case. Detective Smith was able to crack the case once and for all thanks to Louise's crucial statement. With Korn's upcoming parole date, Detective Smith swiftly obtained a grand jury indictment for the 1974 murder of Ruth Donch and ready for the trial. The verdict was delivered on June 17, 2000, resulting in Korn being convicted of aggravated murder. Nevertheless, Ohio law prevented the death penalty from being applied to the case. As a result, Korn was sentenced to life imprisonment without the chance of parole for 30 years. The quaint town of Tustin, California bore witness to the hopeful beginnings of a new family with 20-year-old Diana Green, and her 21-year-old husband, Kevin Green. Their excitement for the impending arrival of their first child filled their days with joyful anticipation. Tragically, their dreams were soon dashed by a devastating event. On September 30th, 1979, Diana, heavily pregnant at 9 months, suffered severe injuries in their apartment. A forceful blow to her forehead rendered her unable to speak or communicate. Fearing for both her life and that of her unborn child, she was swiftly taken to the hospital. Despite efforts, medical professionals could not detect any signs of life in the baby, declaring it stillborn. The question remained, who could be behind this cruel act? Was it fueled by hatred or perhaps a deeper motive? Tustin, California is a quaint town with a storied past. Renowned for its lively orange groves that once dominated the area, earning it the moniker the City of Trees. As time passed, Tustin evolved into a thriving community that retains its small-town charm while providing residents with a comfortable and convenient lifestyle. Its close proximity to major attractions in Southern California and its warm, family-oriented environment make Tustin an appealing destination for both living and visiting. Additionally, Tustin is recognized as one of the 25 safest places in the United States for families, further enhancing its already charming reputation. Unfortunately, the safety and security that Tustin is known for did not extend to the Green family, whose promising life was tragically shattered beyond repair. On the final Saturday of September 1979, Diana and Kevin were at home, enjoying the movie together. Kevin encountered a long line of cars at the drive-thru, waiting patiently for an additional 30 minutes. Upon finally receiving their food from the hamburger stand, Kevin returned home only to find evidence of a break-in. Discovering his wife with a head injury that seemed to be from a gunshot, Kevin acted swiftly, immediately dialing 911 for urgent assistance. Diana was swiftly taken to the hospital, where a medical examination revealed that her wound was not from a gunshot, but from blunt force trauma. The pregnant mother, in her 9th month, fought for her life for 8 grueling hours in the emergency room. Despite her valiant efforts, she tragically succumbed to her injuries. With the baby nearly at full term, doctors performed an emergency cesarean section. Despite their best efforts, the devastating outcome was that the baby was stillborn and Diana slipped into a coma. During his wife's difficult hospitalization, Kevin remained steadfast by her side, praying for her recovery. Meanwhile, the Tustin Police Department initiated an investigation to uncover the truth behind the incident. Their primary focus was on meticulously examining Kevin's statements. Detective Steve Foster reached out to the Greens' neighbors to inquire about any unusual occurrences on the night of the attack or if they had witnessed any suspicious behavior. Although no immediate leads pointed to a suspect, a crucial piece of information emerged. The neighbors reported hearing an argument between the couple that night. This prompted the police department to scrutinize Kevin's alibi more closely. They confirmed his claim of visiting a hamburger stand, but what puzzled them was that there was a stand within walking distance from the Greens instead. Kevin had chosen to drive to a location more than 15 minutes away, raising suspicions and prompting further investigation. According to Kevin, he had seen a black man near a black van when he left on the day of the incident, and upon his return, he encountered the same man again. However, Detective Foster had different plans. As the investigation progressed, the forensic department conducted tests on Diana's body, collecting a sample of male bodily fluid and performing blood tests. In the absence of DNA testing, they focused on identifying the blood type, hoping it would provide a breakthrough in the case. The results revealed that the blood type was O-negative, a rare type in the United States, and intriguingly, it matched Kevin's blood type. While it was not surprising to find Kevin's bodily fluid in Diana's body due to their marital status, the police understood the significance of any evidence implicating Kevin in a situation like this. 2 months later, in December 1979, Diana emerged from her coma and regained her ability to speak. She immediately began communicating with her parents, prompting the arrival of police officers eager to hear her account. Their primary concern was whether Kevin was the perpetrator. Fortunately, they received the answers they had been desperately seeking. Diana was able to clearly communicate that Kevin was responsible for her ordeal. However, When confronted with his wife's, Kevin stubbornly clung to his original claims of innocence. Deep down, he knew there was no escape. He was fully aware that anything he said would only further incriminate him. His previous statements to the police were nothing more than a web of lies. With Diana's statement as their strongest evidence, Kevin was arrested and brought to trial in October 1980 to face the charges against him. Diana, the sole witness in the case, remained resolute in her accusation against her husband. Despite Kevin's continued denial of any involvement, he believed that Diana's severe head trauma had affected her recollection of the events that transpired that night. The prosecution sought the expertise of Dr. Martin Brenner, psychiatrist, to establish Diana Green's credibility as a witness. However, the defense encountered a setback when their request for an independent psychiatric evaluation of Diana's mental state was denied. Despite her struggles, including difficulty spelling her own last name while under oath, Diana Green took the stand and served as the sole witness against Kevin Green. The trial lasted for a week and just 2 days after its conclusion. On November 7, 1980, jury delivered their verdict. Kevin received a 15-year sentence at San Quentin State Prison after being convicted of second-degree murder, attempted murder, and assault with a deadly weapon. With the case officially closed, it seemed that justice had been served and the city of Tustin could finally find some relief. However, the tranquility was short-lived as a series of similar assaults continued to haunt the area. These incidents followed a consistent pattern of break-ins followed by attacks on women, mirroring the horrifying experience of Diana Green. These crimes have been ongoing for months prior to Diana's attack and persisted even after her ordeal, yet they remain unsolved. After 15 years had passed, doubts began to emerge within the police force regarding Kevin's guilt. The unresolved cases and the recurring pattern of assaults raised suspicions. In January of 1996, the Orange County Forensics Lab in Santa Ana conducted tests on evidence collected from a series of cold cases spanning 17 years. These cases shared a strikingly similar modus operandi and were attributed to a presumed single perpetrator known as the bedroom basher. The tests yielded a breakthrough when a blood sample provided by an assailant named Gerald Parker matched the evidence. This discovery marked a significant turning point in the previously unsolved cases. Made possible by the unwavering dedication and hard work of Detective Tom Tarpley, a recent addition to the Tustin Police Department. Following this breakthrough, the tests were expanded to 3 other cases believed to be the work of the bedroom basher. Once again, the results confirmed the growing suspicion that they were dealing with the serial killer Gerald Parker. Detective Tom Tarpley, driven by a determination to uncover the truth, delved into the details of Diana's case. His goal was to determine whether Kevin was the right person behind bars or if the true culprit was indeed Gerald Parker. In the course of his investigation into Parker's background, he uncovered that Parker was a former Marine with a history of run-ins with the law, including a previous incident involving the abduction and assault of a 13-year-old girl. It was time for a meeting with Parker to finally obtain the necessary answers to bring closure to the situation. The truth emerged. Kevin Green was innocent. Subsequently, on June 17, 1996, Tom Tarpley met with Kevin, who had been incarcerated for 16 years for a crime he did not commit. Kevin Green was eventually exonerated and walked out of prison a free man. Despite Kevin's release, Diana remained firm in her belief that he was the one who attacked her, although she acknowledged that Parker might have played a role in some way. Kevin admitted to past arguments and altercations with Diana, insisted that he was not involved in the incident that night. Nevertheless, Kevin was acquitted of all charges while Parker was sentenced to death. Additionally, in October 1999, Governor Gray Davis awarded Kevin $620,000 in compensation for the unjust years he spent in prison. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.